Wait! Who are you?
I am the immortal owl, the foul eye of oblivion. I am the almighty misanthrope, the rope that tightens with the ticking of the clock, the grit that sits in the bellies of believers, forcing bile into the throats of gloating hordes. I am the everlasting, infrangible archenemy of ego, the absolute and infinite blackness at the end of the tunnel, the funnel down which every optimist must go. I trample on the dreams of those who think they are gods, and put their putrid flesh at odds with their most supercilious minds. I am the only true. I am the inevitable end of all things. I am your past and your future.
If you're someone who has been subscribed to me for a while, you probably know me as the guy who makes those weird aesthetic music videos. You know, the ones that are a single shot, usually in slow motion, while lyrics dance across the screen? Well, I'm doing something new, taking my artistic thirst to new places and doing something that I've wanted to try doing for a while. I just needed the right topic to get me started. At the beginning of 2020, I took a heavy interest in horror films, and as a physical collector, I needed a solid source to get my Blu-rays from. Because Amazon had a shipping time of 3 months, I turned to a trustworthy site called Diabolic DVD. My first snag was a film that any pretentious genre lover knows well, and that is...
I don't agree. I believe heaven and hell are one and the same. The soul belongs to heaven, and the body to hell.
My second pick was something that I had talked myself into getting because of my profound love of Panos Cosmatos' Mandy, and that was... And finally, I grabbed something that I had never heard of, a little Scotch-British film from a company called Hex Studios. The Lord of Tears found its way into my shopping cart, and a week later, it was in my Blu-ray player. Now, the allure of this film and the mysterious cult following around it is what drove me into its gaze originally. An ancient anthropomorphic demon, a haunted Victorian mansion, a foggy British forest, a mother's suicide, a father's journal, an unknown American girl, and a traumatized English teacher are all thrown together and jumbled into the blender of this Penny Dreadful-esque Lovecraftian tale? Hell yes, I'll grab a copy. And as the credits rolled on my first viewing of the film, I thought to myself, this is the worst movie I have ever seen. The film was in fact so bad that originally this video was intended to be a YMS-style roasting of the whole film. I had 15 pages of jokes and burns written out in perfect MLA format, ready to go, ready to smite this film from existence to my audience of approximately 0. But after watching Lord of the Tears an additional 3 times to prepare myself for the video, I saw something within the film, something I think should be discussed. Quick disclaimer, I do not have a Blu-ray drive, so I had to use the DVD rip for this video. I apologize, it's in the budget, I promise. The Lord of Tears is Laurie Brewster's 2013 directorial debut, a film made hand-in-hand with Hex Studios, his Scottish production company based in Edinburgh. Being inspired that Japanese films such as Ringu use their own country's rich and flowing mythology, Brewster set out to make such a film using the mythology surrounding his own Celtic background and decided on the Owl Man, a legend of Monan, England. The film was about a character named James, and with the opening scene we see him in a law firm being read aloud the final will of his mother, who hung herself from a tree. The letter leaves the old family house in his name, and after finding himself suddenly plagued by nightmares that may be attached to deep childhood trauma, he goes out to this house to face his literal demons. The film entitles itself to many bleak themes such as childhood abuse, existentialism, and the morality and sacrifice. And as I watched it for the second time, I saw how depressing the film really is, even though it doesn't always feel that way. In fact, most of it feels like a middle school play.
Monsieur? Is there a lady in your life? I thought not. You just seem like the type of person to not let people in without putting up a fight.
The main character in this film, James, is played by Ewan Douglas, a man who has apparently never heard of acting before.
This place was built on the site of an old pagan shrine. There's even a map of where exactly it used to be.
That would explain all the ghosts.
Are you being serious?
Deadly.
Don't you get frightened?
I don't bother them, they don't bother me.
Then you're braver than I am.
Yes, but that's obvious. I knew it the second I saw you. You're terrified. You have been for years.
I suppose I have. I've been hiding from a lot of things for a long time. You're very brave, and you're very wise.
Well, thank you.
I won't sugarcoat it, he does a shit job. I don't like to use the term cringeworthy, but I'll slap a cringe label on this man's abilities, because Jesus almighty, it is bad. His co-star, Lexi Holm, does a good job at trying to give the screen energy, but he just seems to suck the life out of it and everything else that happens around him. At first I thought that the writer and director were the ones sucking all the natural tension out of the film, but now I'm just convinced it was him, because there's just nothing else standing in the Peak's way that this movie could have been. There could be, however, a redeeming point here within his performance, and that is that James is a traumatized child.
Fate has delivered us new hope in the form of a young American woman whom we have employed as Jamie's nanny. As she will rely on us for food and lodgings, then technically we are her guardians, making her a suitable offering to Moloch. According to the rite, she must first be drowned, then the head removed and placed in the shrine. Little Jamie, by some ill circumstance, witnessed part of the ritual. He has not spoken since, nor does he seem fully present. Flora has made a full physical recovery, but is now sick with guilt and worry for our son. We must leave Balduric as soon as possible, in the hope that distance will mend whatever it is that is broken in Jamie.
Evie is just the ghost version of James's childhood babysitter, the woman who cared for him when his mother was dying and when his father turned his back on him. Neglected and alone, James only had Evie to comfort him, and when he accidentally witnessed her murder by the hands of his own father, well, I'm sure that does something to a kid. Throughout the film, we see multiple symptoms of PTSD within James. There are vivid and scattered memories, nightmares, and visions that plague him from the very opening of the film, a cluster of terrifying mental reflections of what he's seen and what he fears is to come. These visions are usually collages of bloody axe violence and water, both of which were major factors in Evie's untimely demise. There are also always puffs of carelessly floating owl feathers throughout the foreground, a reminder of the monster that lies within the face of this film. The Owlman is possibly a mere childhood invention or a character representation of PTSD.
You won't remember, but when you were a child, that place drove you insane. You were convinced that a monster lurked there, with elongated limbs and giant eyes. You were so afraid that it had come for you, that you tried to drown yourself in the pool.
He appears when James's mental state is at its worst, at best only making James anxious and worried, at absolute worst, inciting full-body terror by unleashing hallucinogenic ghosts and memories at James. He also never actually physically interacts with James. Owlman simply just watches, speaks, and manipulates the reality that surrounds him, twisting what he perceives to be real into something that probably isn't, the stress of which can cause mood swings and abnormal behaviors, a duet to fellow PTSD symptoms. His immature and odd behaviors are more examples of his PTSD. Because of his young and damaged mindset, James probably never truthfully got to spend time as an actual child, making him grow up too fast and have a distorted sense of reality, which can cause sufferers to become socially distant from others and can make relationships, both platonic and romantic, difficult. If you didn't already notice, James only has one human relationship in the whole film, and that is with his friend Alan, someone who appears in his dreams as a violent, dangerous figure. Even though Alan is James's only friend, it is he who ultimately destroys James's trust by killing him in the same way Evie was killed. This act of distrust that was seen in his nightmares is something that could be its own nightmarish example of the paranoid distrust of a trauma survivor, which hints that most of this film could very well be completely in James's head if you really think deep enough into it, but I digress. I referred to H.P. Lovecraft already in this video, and considering the theme of mortality and existentialism at the heart and soul of this film, I would say it's appropriate. The best examples of what I mean is that James is the only truthfully young character in this whole movie. Alan, although the same age as James, is trying to wrestle with the idea of his dad dying, and it is this realization that drives him over the edge of sanity. James's father is similar, but we recognize his fate and his wife's. The only two in the film who are never conflicted with the plight of age are Evie and James, and yet they're the only ones who seem to suffer from it, and ultimately take the bite of the axe. The old kill the young out of jealousy for their youth, and thus the young cannot grow old. A tragedy as old as time. If I had to compare Lord of Tears to anything, it would be another UK-based independent film that takes its themes from childhood abuse and uses monstrous anthropomorphic creatures to drive its core. Possum. Possum did not come out for another 5 years after Lord of Tears hit the Bram Stoker International Film Festival, and it's probably the better tale. I say that subjectively, though. The two films are still very different, Lord of Tears being inspired by Japanese cinema and Lovecraftian tales, and Possum being heavily influenced by the silent era of the 20s and European expressionist films, primarily those of the German variety. Nevertheless, both handle the themes of trauma, abuse, and existentialism in very well done ways. Though taking very drastically different paths and having very different tones, they're interpretations that shed light on sensitive subjects in interesting ways. In the end, however, Lord of Tears is a confusing movie. It's bad. So bad. There's a 5-minute dance sequence that makes no sense. There's hardly any decent cinematography. The dialogue sounds written by a 12-year-old, and James's character will get on your everlasting nerves as he stumbles his way through the script. It is, however, fair to say that if viewed through the right lens, it can probably be seen as something worthwhile, and even though that has the same quality as porn, there are some good scenes to consider and opinions to take away. This in itself begs the question, is a film you have to bend your perspective for really a good film? Is it worth the effort in analyzing it and viewing it only to have to manually shift your thoughts around? Or does that disrupt the natural subjectivity and ultimately ruin the experience of genuinely experiencing art from your own perspective? I guess that's just up to you, the audience, to decide. Personally, I've watched many films by fixating myself on a specific flavor of the context and just seeing where it takes me, but not everyone enjoys that. If you stayed this far through the video, thank you. It means a lot. I know there's a lot of issues with this video, and considering it's my first attempt at a film analysis or video essay of any kind, I would say I'm off to a slightly okay-ish start. I have a list of close to 50 other videos that I want to make that are all along the same lines as this one, so if you want to see what I do next, hit subscribe. My Letterboxd, Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram are all down below, as well as my blogging website where you can read all of my video transcripts. Anyways, I guess I'll see you next time.